Holy moly, it's time for another Risk of Rain 2 tier list, baby. I bet you weren't expecting this video, were you? I've been speedrunning the Gauntlet, which is Eclipse 8 maximum difficulty with no lunar items. It's been a couple weeks now, and after obtaining and promptly unobtaining the Huntress world record, figured just because the game is so much different when you're going for a speedrun than the regular game, it might be interesting for me to share my thoughts and for you to learn what items are different, how they play out, etc., etc. So let's start here by covering the tiers of items. First of all, lunar tier. Can't use lunar items. There you go. Lunar tier. Ladies and gentlemen, it's that simple. Can't use them. Boom. Lunar tier. The next tier is nice. Anything that makes you go, nice, sick, awesome. I love this. This is the best item in the game. Oh, man, it's going to aid the run. It's going to... When it's actually the worst item that you possibly could have gotten, that's this tier right here. Not that they're useless items. They're just not useful for the speed run whatsoever. The tier after that is, could be better. Could be worse. It does something for the run, I guess. It's not going to help you very much, but it's okay. Nice is like actually nice. Like, okay, good. This is a nice, good item. Good. I like this item. That's that tier. And then finally, yeah. Any item that is in the yeah tier, best item in the game pretty much. If you had a run of purely yeah items, you would get the world record on that run. Period. End of story. It's that simple. So these are the creme de la creme, the best items in the entire game for a speedrun. So starting here with the first actual tier of items, we have the nice, awesome, sick, fantastic items. Focus Crystal, you're just not going to be in range. I should preface this by saying this list is tailored towards the Huntress, as that's all I've been playing. However, if you're playing another survivor, if you're trying to get the world record on anyone else, these items should generally still be accurate. Obviously, Focus Crystal on Loader, it's going to be useful, but for most survivors, they're not going to be able to utilize it. Most of these items that I have in here should be applicable to every survivor. I'll try and note the few exceptions. Focus Crystal is one of them, obviously on the Loader, or Mercenary maybe if you're running. Melee, Mercenary for some reason. Fresh Meat, just extra HP, totally useless. If you get hit, like, who cares? Goat Hoof, you would think that speed is pretty useful for a speed run. I know. Rookie mistake, guys. You don't actually need that much speed. Energy drink is more than enough. You only need a couple stacks of it if you're going to get it in the first place. But really, you just need damage. Straight up damage. Goat Hoof, no damage, unfortunately. Bungus, not very useful. By itself, it's actually almost entirely useless. The only exception would be in the early game when you're trying to hit a blood shrine or opening a void item, void cradle, I believe is what it's called. Anything like that, then maybe you could use the Bungus, but you don't want to see it. Same thing with the Wungus, the void equivalent. You just don't need it, unfortunately. It does something. It'll help you. Maybe I've been saved 3 times. I've done probably close to 400 runs at this point, resetting a bunch, but close to 400 runs, and maybe the Wungus has saved me 5 times. Not even that. I'm sorry. I just had to think about that for a second. Not even. It's like maybe 2 times it's actually come in clutch. War Banner, you just don't want to see the effect whatsoever. It's not useful. You need all of your items. I probably should have started this section with this. You need all of your items to help you with the Mithrix fight in some capacity. So if these items don't help you in the Mithrix fight, they're pretty much just not useful for the speedrun. War Banner, Medkit, Teddy Bear, you don't need to block the damage because in an ideal speedrun, world record attempt, you should have enough damage to kill everything. So the Teddy Bear, you won't need it because you're not getting hit. You're killing everything. Gasoline, it's kind of okay, but I really don't want to see these in my run because I want the other common items, and I just don't need the AoE that it provides. Stun Grenade, self-explanatory. Fireworks, you're not going to utilize them. Doesn't matter. Topaz Brooch, doesn't matter. Roll of Pennies, you might think this is kind of useful because you can cheese it with like a fire elite when they leave the fire trail. You take damage over time, it gives you money, or if you get burned or bled by another enemy, or lesser wisps hit you, they hit you 3 times in one shot. You can make use of Roll of Pennies, but the amount of time it takes to do that is not worth it. You'd rather just have another item and then just move on with your life, Opal, again, you don't need defense. Elixir, same thing. Now, Elixir is sometimes clutch because it can save your delicate watches, which we'll get to in a bit. But for the most part, you just don't want to see it. Again, Will-O-The-Wisp, same thing as Gasoline. You don't need the AoE whatsoever. The green items in general, before I get too into the weeds here, the green items in general are... Holy crap, the more you play Risk of Rain 2, especially if you're playing it fast, like for a world record attempt, the more you realize that the green items are just trash. Like, they feel terrible to get. Not that the effects are necessarily bad themselves, it's just, it doesn't feel good to get the vast majority of greens, and it's so insane. It's so much different from a regular run of Risk of Rain 2, where you would love to see the occasional Will-O-The-Wisp, the occasional Infusion, Berserker Pauldron, Bandolier to get the... all of this stuff has its uses. In a speed run, oh my gosh, like almost every green you see is useless. It's terrible. Terrible. Leeching Seed, self-explanatory, Stealth Kit, Infusion. I don't really need to name all of these. There's a explicit reason why they're all here. they don't help with the Mithrix fight. And I should note here, this is like the one exception. The Shurikens, this is because, again, I'm specifically playing on Huntress. Obviously, Shuriken on any other survivor is way more useful because you don't have auto-aim. Auto-aim means that you don't need to be looking at the target that you're attacking, and the Shuriken will just travel wherever you're looking. So you can put 2 and 2 together. Shuriken's not very useful on Huntress, but obviously on pretty much everybody else, this would be like probably in the nice tier. Like, it's pretty good. Let's go. All right, I like this item. Maybe even the top tier. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Red items, legendaries. Unfortunately, these suffer the same fate as the green items. They're just not useful for Mithrix. You have to kill stuff to get the Ceremonial Dagger, the Frost Relic, the Happiest Mask, the Soulbound Catalyst, the Brain Stalks. You have the Resonance Disc. You have the Interstellar Death Plant, Bottle K. Oh, that's using your equipment. You know what I'm saying? The vast majority of legendaries, the reds, are just not useful whatsoever. Deal's Best Friend, you might think that's kind of useful. It's really not. You need damage. And this is kind of in general. If you didn't know this about Risk of Rain 2, maybe you're a relatively new player. Hi, how you doing? Welcome. How did you find this video? I don't know. Hey, what's up? You don't really need the Deal's Best Friend because if you had gotten any other legendary item, would you have died in that situation that you just died in to use up your Deal's Best Friend? Probably not, right? If you had an actually good legendary, probably not. All the rest of these legendaries, they're here. This one pains me a lot. Sorry, I should have finished my sentence. They're here because they don't help with the Mithrix fight. Surprise. The laser scope pains me. I don't know why. They added an item that doubles your crit damage, or scales, let's just say scales your crit damage, but doesn't give any crit chance itself. It's like, even the Shatter Spleen does that, man. Why does this item not give you at least like 5% crit chance? But it should honestly be like 10 or 15. It's a legendary, guys. It's a legendary. It's not going to show up all the time. How does this not give crit? It doesn't make sense to me. That's it for legendary items. Start with boss items here. The pearls, you're just not going to see them. I have maybe had 2 stages where I have both a cleansing pool and a lunar pod. So the option to get a lunar item, you can still pick them up on a stage as long as you cleanse them before you leave. That is the rule set of the gauntlet. Again, Eclipse 8, no lunar items, except for if you see a lunar pod and a cleansing pool, same stage, you can make use of it. I've seen that combo twice, again, in like 400 plus runs. And it's just not worth it because I think it's an 80% chance or something to get a regular pearl, which is just 10% health. It's like a bison steak. You know, for the Huntress, it's basically a bison steak. So not very useful whatsoever. And for these boss items, again, they just do not help with the Mithrix fight. Mired Urn, like, sometimes can do something, but you're just not going to be in range to activate it. It's just, it doesn't help you whatsoever. Equipment. Now, this is where things get a little bit interesting. You may notice here that every single equipment is in this category, except for these 5 equipment. Reason is, you need a skip to get to Mithrix. Period. If you have to do the pillar mechanic, which is when you get to the moon and you have to charge those 4 random pillars that spawn, if you have to do that mechanic, you lost your run, period. Even if you had the best run possible, I guarantee you will not, well, for the world record, you will not get the world record if you have to use a non-pillar skip equipment. End of story. Doesn't matter how much time it saves you during the other 5 stages, the teleporter fights, etc., because the vast majority of teleporter fights, if not every single teleporter fight, will be finished before it's even done charging. So the equipment you use is irrelevant. You just need a pillar skip. This is where the recycler comes in down here, and then the Trophy Hunter Tricorn. I'll talk about that later, but that's essentially just before you get a pillar skip equipment. The Trophy Hunter Tricorn is way more useful than other equipment, obviously, because it gives you an actual item on top of it. It doesn't just, exist in the slot and then is dumped out for a pillar skip later. Anyway, so that's the reasoning for all this equipment. These equipment are great. Like Capacitor, Crowdfunder, they all have a use in a regular run of Risk of Rain 2, Credit Card, Royal Caffeinator plus Fireworks. Like, there's tons of different cool stuff you can do. But in a speed run, they're entirely useless. Same thing with all the aspects. Unfortunately, these aspects right here, these are the elite types, the Glacial, Overloading, Malachite, all that stuff. Those are really rare drops. They're really cool to see when you see them. Unfortunately, totally useless for a speed run. You need a pillar skip. Scrap, you're never going to scrap a red. I think I've had maybe 20 red items in my entire 400 plus runs. 20 red items have dropped, something like that. You're just not going to make use of the scraps here. And then yellow scrap, you're just going to scrap a boss item if you have it. You're going to print a boss item if you have a good boss printer in front of you. It doesn't matter what items you have. You're just going to give them away, so the scrap is irrelevant. Void items. These ones are pretty interesting as well. You really just need the big boys. Polyloot, Plasma Shrimp. So if it's not a Polyloot and it's not a Plasma Shrimp, you really didn't need it in the first place. There are a couple other exceptions. We'll get to those in a second, though. Void Crit doesn't help on Mithrix. Void Band is like literally the worst item in the entire game. If you didn't watch Disputed Origins' newest video, you should probably go watch it. Ranked all the Void items. Void item, the band is terrible. I cannot believe that the Void Band was implemented in the way that it was. It might have just been implemented as a bait, honestly. That's just a straight up, like, they wanted to pull a prank on us all. It's so freaking bad. It's like the worst item in the game. Void Send Flame, again, it's like a will-o'-the-wisp, who cares? Tenta-Bobble, like, yes, it'll root Mithrix, even on Eclipse 8 if you have enough attack speed, enough Chronobaubles, but you're not going to have enough Chronobaubles, and you don't want that effect anyway. It's not useful. Just play the Mithrix fight like a man. Okay, just kill him. It's that simple. Pluripotent Larva. This might warrant being bumped up a tier. However, every time that I've got a Pluripotent Larva, which is the Void Dios best friend, when you die, it corrupts all of your items that are able to be turned into Void items, turns them into Void items. So you might be thinking, okay, well, if you want Polyloot, and Plasma Shrimp, you might want to use a Pluripotent Larva to intentionally die, like jump off a ledge or something, and then get a Polyloot and a Plasma Shrimp. However, you're also probably going to have some crit. You're also probably going to have some Void Bans. So you'd rather just get a Polyloot and get a Plasma Shrimp rather than intentionally sacrificing yourself for the Pluripotent Larva. That's the thought process behind that one. I would say it's pretty fair to put it down in the useless category, especially because when you open up a Void item, you could have gotten a Polyloot or a Plasma, but it rolled into one of these, the red items, the Larva or the Clover. You just don't want to see them. You want to see the big boys. Lysate Cell, I've gone back and forth a little bit on this thing. Sometimes it's cool to get it in the early game, but because, again, it's not a Polyloot, it's not a Plasma Shrimp, I just can't put it any higher than this because it's competing with the exact loot pool, because this is a green item. If you did not know, when you open up a Void Cradle, a Void item of any kind, whatever item you get, it's still within its category, right? Because Void items are just corrupted versions of regular items. So if you get a Void Crit, that's still a white item. If you get a Needle Tick, it's also a white item. The Tri-Tip Dagger, same thing goes for the Lysate Cell, the Tenta-Bobble, and the Void Send Flame, and the Void Ban. You are essentially rolling in the green item pool. So if you see a Lysate Cell, you actually could have gotten a Polyloot or a Plasma Shrimp right there, but it gave you a Lysate Cell instead. So that's why it's down here. The newly hatched Zoya, it's just a boss item. You're not going to use that. Saver Spaces, again, you don't need the defense. And Lungus, you don't need the healing. It's that simple. Moving on to the next tier of items, we have the tier. They could be a whole lot worse, but they also could be a whole lot better. Also, note the hair took a shower. Let's go. But before I get to that, we have a couple of changes in the other section. The Repulsion Armor Plate should have been in the nice item category because you just don't need the defense from it. Simple as that. And then the green scrap, I just forgot to put it here. The Regen scrap, I didn't explain, so I guess I'll explain it now. If you see a good green printer, you're going to go all into the printer anyways. So the extra time it takes to scrap all your items is irrelevant. On top of that, you're probably not going to see a good green printer in the first place. So there you go. Scrap is pretty much useless because of that. Except for, and starting with the tier, the white scrap. The only time you're going to scrap is when you see a scrapper next to or near enough to a good printer. And again, you're not going to see a good green printer, and you're especially not going to see a red or a boss item printer. But if you see a boss item printer, kind of the same philosophy with the green printer, you're not going to scrap because you're just going to print all into that boss item anyway. The white scrap is the exception because there are more good white items than any of the other category, and you will likely have enough white items to warrant some scrap. Otherwise, it's just good to print at the good printer rather than using your time to scrap, because seconds matter when you're going for a world record. Who would have thought seconds matter? Just like inches. The Monster Tooth is the next item. On stage 1, if you get a Blood Shrine plus a Void item plus a Combat Shrine, did I say Blood Shrine first? I think I did. If you have any combination of those items, the Monster Tooth will speed that stage up significantly. Stage 1, stage 2, pretty much useless after that. The Cautious Slug is by far just way better than the Monster Tooth, except for in the stage 1, stage 2 situations that I just described. That's the only reason this guy's up here. Backup Mag, this is only for the add phase of Mithrix when he goes away for the first time and you have to kill all the other monsters. Backup Mag, if you have no Ukulele, can be pretty useful. Other than that, not very useful. Rusted Key, actually by itself, is pretty bad. I would put it down here. But the sole reason it's in the tier is because you better pray that you're getting an encrusted key, the Void version, the encrusted key, instead of the rusted key. You want to turn it into the Void item. That's the only reason, because Polyloot and Plasma Shrimp, baby, they're pretty good. Speaking of which, Plasma Shrimp, Shield Gen. If you have more shields, you won't lose your shields when you get hit, or you have a higher chance of not losing your shields when you get hit. Therefore, you have way more damage, thus you're saving a lot of time. Thus, the Shield Gen actually can come in quite useful if you have like 1 or 2 stacks, especially on Mithrix. If he hits you, maybe you'll retain a little bit of your shield and some much needed damage because of that. Otherwise, it's pretty bad. Needle Tick and Tri-Tip, I did the opposite order here. They're both okay, but you're not going to have enough speed to really stack them up to any significant values. But they're just still free damage, so they're, it could be better. Could be worse. Crowbar, same idea. You may utilize it, but you really need a good setup. You need at least like 2 of each band probably, and a little bit of crit and a little, armor piercing watches, etc., for it to really start popping off. But it's still free damage at the end of the day, so it's, it could be worse. Red Whip, it gives you a little bit of movement speed as you're traversing the stages to loot, but typically you're only going to loot stuff that's very close to the teleporter, and before that point, you're just kind of looting the stage normally, I would say. You're killing stuff, getting shrines, getting barrels, etc. So you're not really using the red whip. You're in combat most of the time. This can save you a couple seconds on the moon, but not really. Just because of how bad the other green items are. That's why the red whip is here. It does something compared to the other ones. Harvester Scythe, same idea. It gives you 5% crit chance. You know, a little bit of damage. The healing is pretty much irrelevant, but a little bit of crit chance could be a whole lot worse. Could be a squid polyp or a hunter's harpoon, you know. Gore's Tome, actually pretty good for the teleporter fight. You can kill enemies and then leave the gold nuggies that they drop. You can leave them on the ground, and then once you hit the teleporter, it starts sucking in all your gold, siphoning it down to 0. Once it hits 0, you have about 2 seconds. You can get any source of gold at that point, and then when you teleport out, you will enter the next stage with that gold. So the idea is to get 1 or 2 Gore's Tomes, kill a bunch of enemies at the teleporter, obviously, and then instead of picking up the tomes that drop, or the nuggies that drop, you then hit the TP, and then you get them on the way out for a little bit of extra money on the next stage. It can save you upwards of like 30 seconds to a minute even sometimes, but the chances of that happening is pretty low. That's why it's in the tier. If it was more consistent, it'd be way higher. Shipping request form, the only reason this is here is you get to get this on stage 1, the boss fight. Again, because of how bad the green items are. If you get this stage 1, you will likely find it at least 2 times, I would say. On the other stages, it's never worth going out of your way to find it. Let me make that very clear. Same thing with the rusted key. If you have no encrusted key, you should not be looking for the lockbox. If you happen to find it when you're looting regularly, then you go for it. Same idea with the shipping request form. Obviously, if you see it across the map on Sky Meadow or something and it has like an armor-piercing round or an ATG, yeah, you're probably going to go for it. But most of the time, this is pretty bad. It's just way better than the other green items, so it's an Meat Hook, same idea as the backup mag. If you have no AoE, it can help you on the ad phase of Mithrix. That is the sole purpose of it being here, and you're really not going to have any legendary red items anyway, so, you know, better than nothing. Alien Head, same idea. It's better than nothing. It's not super useful. It basically just reduces your ballista cooldown by a few seconds. Other than that, not a big deal. Hardlight Afterburner, the inverse, so it reduces your blink cooldown way more than the Alien Head because it gives you extra charges as well, so it's actually really strong. But you don't really need that extra mobility if you're an experienced player, which I'm assuming if you're going for the world record on the maximum difficulty, you're probably an experienced player. You probably don't need the Hardlight Afterburner. You could have got a lot of other red items, but it's still kind of useful. Shattering Justice, if you did not know, whenever Mithrix dashes, he removes all non-damaging debuffs off of him, except for the Symbiotic Scorpion, which is why you don't see the Symbiotic Scorpion here. You see the Shattering Justice. He removes the Shattering Justice. So he's on Eclipse 8. If you did not know, Eclipse monsters, number 1, move faster, so he'll be way closer to you more often than not. And when Mithrix is close to you, what does he do? He dashes all the time. And on top of that, enemies have 50% cooldown reduction, meaning they attack twice as often. So he's dashing all the time, is my point. So you're really not going to have Shattering up. However, if you do get it up and then you manage to get a ballista with your bands, you're going to do massive amount of damage. Better than nothing. Drone Man, same idea. Better than nothing. It's just a little bit of tickle damage. I call it tickle damage rather than burst damage. You're not going to have drones. That's a big thing. You're not spending your money on drones. Even if you get a drone parts, it's not worth going out of your way because you're going to get it likely on like stage. It could be any stage, honestly, because you're not really going for the guaranteed legendary on Siren's Call, the alloy worship unit, the big ball that spawns when the bird nests, and then you have the legendary chest on Abyssal Depths. You're not really going for those. You're not. Let me make that clear. You're not going for the guaranteed legendary because it's not worth the time, simply. But if you do manage to pull a legendary and it pops out as drone parts, I mean, I guess you get a little bit of free damage from Drone Man, right? Better than nothing. You're gonna hear me say that a lot in this tier. Better than nothing. Titanic Knurl. This is basically just a half of a slug. I just call it a free slug though, because it's half of a slug, but with no condition. You just always get the regen. So, you know, a little bit of regen from the cautious slug. That'll half of a cautious slug again. It can come in clutch, but it's really not worth it. It's mainly just here because the other boss item's not very that useful. Beetle Gland, same idea as the little bit tickle damage. Beetle Guard will occasionally be hitting Mithrix. Better than nothing. Molten Perforator, you might be surprised, but Molten Perforator is not what you want to see for the Mithrix fight. Why? Because he's so fast and he dashes all the time. The Perforator projectiles are just not going to hit him. He's that fast. So it's actually not that good for the Mithrix fight whatsoever. Empathy Core, same idea as the Beetle Gland. And then finally, Volcanic Egg. While this is a potential pillar skip, it is the worst pillar skip by far because you have to have at least 3 fuel cells to get up. If you, obviously, you may be thinking, oh, you only need, you could do it with no fuel cells if you get to the bottom of the Mithrix arena. Yeah, but the whole point is get to the top, right? You don't want to spend an extra 30 seconds waiting for the egg to come back up so you can actually get to the top. You want to get to the top in the first place. 30 seconds is a lot of time in a speedrun, a world record attempt especially. So Volcanic Egg, realistically, you're not going to have enough fuel cells to make use of it. But if by some miracle you got like 3 fuel cells, or you found a fuel cell printer and you have an egg, and you did not find a vase or a chrysalis, which are way better than the egg, I guess it can come in handy. Moving on to the second best tier of items, the actually nice items. We have Cautious Slug, Energy Drink, Mocha, Hopu Feather, Predatory Instincts, Wax Coil, Warhorn, Head Stomper, Tesla Coil, Shatter Spleen, Milky Chrysalis, Recycler, Trophy Hunter's Tricorn, and Charged Perforator. There will be a test. Write this down. Take your notes. You have been warned. Anyway, starting with the Cautious Slug, this is the best healing item on Eclipse in general, and it's especially true for a speed run where you want to take as many risks as possible. The Slug will just heal you up. This is also the best item to get for dealing with Void Cradles, not the whole Void Seed that spawns, but any Void Cradle that you see with the free Void item. If you don't have a Slug, it'll take ages to get enough health to open up the item, especially if you've taken damage before, which you likely have because you're going so fast. But especially if you have more than one Void item or you have a Blood Shrine plus a Void item, this enables you to go super fast in between them. So Slug is amazing to get. 2 or 3 stacks is perfect, but one is ideal as well. You don't want too many Slugs because then it comes on a borderline useless at that point. You could have gotten way better common items, but a couple stacks of Slug, awesome. Energy Drink, same idea. It speeds up your stages. Obviously, gives you a lot of movement speed. On the Huntress, this is very valuable because she's always sprinting. You don't have to ever stop sprinting for your attacks. Other survivors, obviously, also going to be very useful. Not as useful on like Commando or Multi or someone that can't attack while sprinting or like can't weave in attacks as efficiently as other survivors. Like Captain, you could sprint most of the time, occasionally attack. You know what I'm saying? So Energy Drink is still very good on everybody. It's especially good on Huntress. But again, kind of a rookie mistake. You don't really need movement speed in a speed run, which is why it's not in the territory. The Mocha, kind of the same idea as the Energy Drink, although it gives attack speed, less movement speed, but it also gives attack speed. Attack speed is very valuable, as most of the items that deal good damage in this game are going to be on-hit items, especially the Polyloot and the Plasma Shrimp. Another foreshadowing. Woo! So Mocha is not bad to get. It doesn't deserve to be in the tier because it is a better item than, these items that are down here. Hopu Feather. One Hopu Feather trivializes the entire Mithrix fight. No exception for Eclipse difficulty. Absolutely fantastic item to get at any point. Plus, it'll maybe save you from other fights as well. The teleporter, like a grandparent or something. I don't know. It can help you. Predatory Instincts, it gives you 5% crit, but more importantly, gives you attack speed based on your recent crits. So if you have a little bit of crit chance, like even 1 or 2 pairs of crit glasses plus a Predatory, you're going to be feeling the benefit that the Predatory gives you. Wax Coil just speeds you up a little bit more, is especially useful on the moon if you don't have a fuel cell. So at the start, when you have to just get up that huge ramp that takes like 30 seconds to a minute sometimes, the Wax Coil can speed you up significantly, not to mention just looting your stage regularly. Warhorn is actually quite good because you're using a pillar skip, as I mentioned in the first section. So if you have a pillar skip, that means your equipment is pretty much useless for actual damage. So the Warhorn turns your equipment into at least a little bit of damage, right? It doesn't feel terrible to get. It's mainly just here again because the other green items are that bad to get. Warhorn feels excellent in a speed run when the other greens are just pretty much useless. Head Stomper obviously does a lot of damage, but to make good use of this, you're going to need like a vase plus a fuel cell plus a little bit of movement speed plus bands. And having all of that plus a Head Stomper is so unlikely. So I'm not going to put it in the territory because it's absolutely not by itself going to win you the run. You need other stuff to go with it. Same idea with the Tesla Coil. It's going to help you a little bit, but it's mainly just tickle damage on Mithrix, which is better than nothing. You definitely need as much damage as you can get. And the radius of the Tesla Coil is so big that it's pretty much always going to be hitting Mithrix as long as you're playing the fight correctly. Shatter Spleen, you're probably going to have a tiny bit of crit. This does give you 5% crit, by the way. Unlike the Laser Scope, best item in the game, by the way. Laser Scope, we love that item. Shatter Spleen does give you 5% crit, and it gives you bleeds on every crit that you land. So like I said, if you have a Predatory with a couple pairs of crit, and you have a Shatter Spleen on top of that, you're going to have some decent extra damage on Mithrix. But the explosion part of this is absolutely useless. Milky Chrysalis, this is the second best pillar skip to get. You need a fuel cell and a little bit of movement speed whenever you use the dash functionality of the Milky Chrysalis. It does scale with your movement speed, so the more speed you have, the faster you can get up to Mithrix. However, you'd want a vase. The eccentric vase is by far the best skip, which is why this is not up here in the top category. It's only here in the mid tier. Or the second lowest one, or second highest one. Excuse me again. Excuse me. Recycler, if you get this early on, it feels excellent because you don't want your pillar skip necessarily on the first few stages. You'd rather have a Tricorn or Recycler, and then you can re-roll the boss item or the teleporter drop and hopefully get something else, or you can re-roll anything. Recycler is pretty self-explanatory. It's a great equipment to get at any point. Trophy Hunter Tricorn. This is very, 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 very good if you get this on stage 2. Roll into stage 3. Pray you get a Grove Tender, which we'll talk about why you want a Grove Tender in the next section, which we'll get to after the Charged Perforator. Charged Perforator is way better than Molten Perforator because the delay between it, so that zapping Mithrix, I think it's only 0.5 seconds, or maybe even be shorter than that. It's not nearly as long as it takes for the regular Perforator to do the whole fountain attack and then come down and finally hit him. The Charged Perforator is way faster, so you can make much better use of it. However, you can literally only get this from a printer because you're going so fast in a speedrun, you're just not going to see an overloading worm. There's no chance whatsoever. So you have to get a Charged Perforator printer, which I have received, I think, 2 of them. I've only had a boss item 1 time, but I've seen 2 Charged Perforator printers. So it's possible. Hey, 2 out of like 400 plus runs, there's a chance. And finally, the moment you've all been waiting for, or maybe not, I have no idea. The tier of items. These are the items that if you have a speedrun and you get all of these items, you get the world record. Period. You're not going to have a run where you get literally only these items, but man, if you did, GG, because they're that good. Soldier Syringe, self-explanatory. Attack speed. Look at every other item in this category. They all scale with attack speed to some degree. Boom. There you go. Soldier Syringe. Attack speed. Excellent. Sticky Bombs. Unironically, Sticky Bombs feel so freaking good when you're going super fast in Risk of Rain 2. They feel amazing to get because there's not a lot of extra sources of damage. So if you get just 2 or 3 Sticky Bombs, you're going to see the difference that they make. And especially if they proc off of a big source of damage like an ATG, if you have a couple stacks of ATG or anything. If you hit, Sticky Bombs just feel awesome. That's all I need to say. I'm not going to over-explain. Lensmaker's Glasses. Critical strike chance. Boom. There you go. Self-explanatory. They also scale the Predatory Instincts a little bit with the attack speed, so even better off of that. But the main reason, these 3 items, the trifecta, I call these the trifecta. Crit, armor-piercing rounds, delicate watches. Each one of these is a separate multiplier to your damage, meaning that let's say you have 100 damage. If you land a crit that goes to 200 damage, then let's say you have 2 armor-piercing rounds, so that 200 is increased by 40%. And then that number, whatever it is, it would be what? I can't do math right now. Holy crap, dude. Don't laugh. 280. Holy crap. Why did it take me that long? Anyway, 200 goes to 280, and then you have some delicate watches. Say you have 5 watches, you double that. 280 goes to 560. Boom! In one hit, you just, how much? That's like 5 times, almost 6 times the damage. And that's with, obviously, you're not going to get capped crit with all of that. Maybe you will. I don't know. Like I said, that's what it takes to get a world record speed run. But they're all multipliers to your damage, which is insanely powerful. And they're all really, 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 really useful on the Mithrix fight. Obviously, every single source of your damage needs to be tailored towards the Mithrix fight, as that is what takes the longest. If you didn't have to charge the freaking teleporters for 90 seconds on every single stage, most of your time would be spent on the Mithrix fight in a speedrun. If not, well, it would probably be a split between looting, but every other stage looting combined would be the equivalent of the entire Mithrix fight. You know, that would be the time if you didn't have to charge the teleporters for 90 seconds. Sorry, this was a massive ramble here at the end of the video. I'm sorry about that. Moving on. So the trifecta, absolutely insane. All of these items, you want them all the time. Fuel Cell, the first green item. You love Fuel Cell because of the eccentric vase equipment. I might as well pair these 2 together because this is the sole purpose. If you have 1 Fuel Cell with a vase, you can bypass that initial spawn on the moon. You can bypass the massive ramp, which saves you like 20 to 30 seconds. And then if you have 2 Fuel Cells, you can Fuel Cell again to the edge before you can, see the actual the stage. Then you can vase to that point, and then you can vase all the way up to Mithrix if you have at least 2 Fuel Cells. So 1 Fuel Cell is perfect, or it's good, but if you have 2 or more, that's ideal because if you have a Warhorn on top of that, you can still make use of it. But the eccentric vase plus the Fuel Cell combo saves you an insane amount of time, especially considering the fact that pillars do exist. You're skipping that entire thing on top of skipping the initial walk of the moon, let's call it. Very, very powerful. ATG missile launcher and ukulele by themselves are also fantastic items. ATG is more useful than ukulele in my opinion because the ATG actually helps on the Mithrix fight by itself, whereas the ukulele doesn't really. Same idea with if it was just ukulele, if the polyloot didn't exist, ukulele would be down here with the meat hooks. But because of the polyloot, oh my gosh, I can't explain to you how much damage Polyloot and Plasma Shrimp, that combo, how much damage that gives you in a run. It's insane. They are just absurdly powerful. So the Plasma Shrimp is the void version of the ATG, which fires a guaranteed missile every time you hit something if you have shields available, which is again why we have shield gen that's not in the bottom tier. The Polyloot has a chance to proc off of every single hit, and it does basically what the ukulele does, the chain lightning attack, but to one specific enemy. So think about that. You have missiles hitting the enemy every time. I think they have a 0.2 proc coefficient, so it's only 20% is likely to proc the Polyloot, the regular. I think Polyloot by itself is a 20% chance, 25%. So you basically have only 20% of that value, so like, I don't know, 5% chance or something. That's per hit. Per hit, you have a chance of doing that. On top of the hit itself. So let's say you're shooting your bow and arrow on Huntress. You're procking a Plasma Shrimp. That has like a 5% chance. The Plasma Shrimp hit has a 5% chance, or whatever the math is. Don't quote me on the math. I can't do it off the top of my head that well. To proc the Polyloot. But each actual hit of your bow and arrow also has a chance to proc the Polyloot on top of that. Like the amount of damage you get from that combo is so insane. If you find an ATG printer, you basically just win the run, because by itself it's also useful, but if you have Plasma Shrimp on top of that, it becomes insane. And if you get an ICBM, which is why this is in the yeah territory, you likely, if you have a competitive run or a run that's on pace with world record, you're going to have likely at least one ATG, right? One form of missile, which is why this is up here. Same way they did with the Clover. You're going to have some sort of crit, some sort of sticky bomb. You're going to have a Polyloot, like probably one of those. So Clover's up here too. You might be wondering, oh, these are super conditional. Like, how is this different from Laser Scope? You're not going to have crit for the Laser Scope. These are actually good legendary items. That's the difference between Laser Scope and these two. These are actually good. Anyway, that was a massive explanation for most of every other item in this tier. Actually, I'm pretty much done explaining things. Bans are self-explanatory. Bans are just extra damage on the end of a chain. Total damage, very nice, juicy. Simple as that. Behemoth, 60% damage at all times, no condition whatsoever. Pretty nice. They don't, well, the only condition is it doesn't scale base damage stuff. So it wouldn't scale your, do I have any base damage in this tier? I guess I don't. What the heck? But it doesn't scale these. But these are total damage. I'm confused, man. I'm confused. Behemoth does not affect Ice and Fire Band, but these are total damage, aren't they? They definitely are total damage. Yeah. Wait, so why doesn't this affect? I'm confused. I thought Behemoth only affected total, and it didn't affect base damage. I'm very confused. Like, it doesn't affect bleed. It doesn't affect damage over time. I'm out of it, bro. What can I say? I'm losing my mind. Let's just consider it 60% more damage at all times. The Behemoth's just that good. Clover, obviously, if you get a Clover and you have a little bit of crit, a little bit of sticky bomb, attack speed, Polyloot, all that stuff, Clover just insane. Symbiotic Scorpion, the Symbiotic Scorpion reduces enemy armor per hit permanently. The permanently part is very important because, like I said, the Shattering Justice earlier, whenever Mithrix dashes, remove Shattering Justice. He does not remove the Symbiotic Scorpion, which is fantastic, but it does have a cap at double damage. It's roughly double damage. It's essentially double damage. There's a bunch of math behind it. So this item essentially equals double damage. I might have put it down in the nice tier. No, it's way better than a lot of other red items, so it has to go up here. Only because sometimes it takes a lot of hits for it to finally reach its full potential to double damage. And then finally, the last item I haven't mentioned, also the Encrusted Key, the Void Key, as I mentioned in the Rusted Key section, is so good because of the fact it has a pretty good chance of getting you a Polyloot or a Plasma Shrimp. Because again, each Void item is still the regular item of its tier. So a Rusted Key and Encrusted Key, it basically functions the same, so it has a very high chance of giving you a green item because the regular lockbox has a very high chance of giving you a green item as well. Although these can give you common voids, so it's not really the same thing. Anyway, there's a bunch of rambling in this section. I might cut some of this out. I don't know. I guess you'll find out in the video, won't you? Anyway, Encrusted Key is very good for Polyloot Plasma Shrimp. Simple as that. And finally, the Little Disciple is the best boss item to get, period, because it is just continual damage. The radius is big enough that you will be using it, and if you're not using it, you should get in range to use it on Mithrix, because it's just that much extra damage. It has proc coefficient, so it will proc your other stuff, your Polyloots, your Plasma Shrimps, your Sticky Bombs, etc. Little Disciple gives you so much damage if you manage to snag one. Fantastic. And with that, we are done. Hopefully this wasn't too long of a video. I tried to go as fast as I could. I like explaining a lot of the intricacies of why certain items work the way they do for a speedrun, but I didn't really feel like sitting down and writing out each specific item like a script style, in my normal tier list style, I would say. But if you enjoyed this video, thanks. Glad you guys enjoyed it. I'm not going to ask for anything. You know what I'm getting at here. You know what I'm getting at. But if you did like it, you may want to check out the stream because I'm still doing the speedruns actively. So if this kind of content interests you, you might want to check out twitch.tv/WoollyGaming because I'm currently doing the speedruns on my channel over there. So come see me take the world record back. I don't know.